we're here to do the agenda for the Colleyville crime. You're all right. You're the mayor. You get to do that if you want to, all right?
Make sure it's on that.
Colleyville Crime Control and Prevention District Board Work Session. I'm going to call it to order at 4:30. So I'll call the roll. Director Nakamura is not here because of a flight delay. I'm here. Director Wheat.
Here.
Mark myself absent. Vice President Newton.
Here.
Director Dodson.
Here.
Director Kelly is not here. Director Rigney.
Here.
All right. So the first thing that we'll discuss is the sales tax applicability to the certain utility charges.
Good evening, Board of Directors. Wanted to bring before you this afternoon a discussion item. As things change over the years, sometimes it's helpful to revisit certain conversations, and this may be a conversation that some of you aren't aware of, is the last time this conversation was had with the Board of Directors was actually prior to my time with the city. So just wanted to make sure that we are all either in agreement that this is the way we'd like to proceed, or if not, have the opportunity to reconsider a different approach. So what we're talking about here, as you're aware, the Colleyville Crime Control and Prevention District is a half-cent sales tax that was approved by our voters back in 1999 for an initial 5-year period. It was reauthorized for an additional 20 years back in 2003. So it'll be up for reauthorization again in 2023. Now, there's some interesting nuances with this. When so the state allowed us to have these special purpose districts, as they're called, for sales taxes. These types of sales taxes were not automatically charged to certain goods and services. So in this instance, the gas and electricity sales was previously prohibited by state law. That changed in the 81st legislative session. It now allows your dedicated half-cent sales taxes, or whatever increment the city chooses, to be applied to those goods and services, but it does require a resolution from the board to make that effective. This is actually something that we did in my prior city, and you mail out a notice to all of the gas and electricity companies and say, you need to start paying our half-cent sales tax, but it does require that formal action. Similarly, the telecommunications service, the half-cent sales tax does not apply to those either, and that would require a separate resolution to make the half-cent sales tax applicable to those services. So really the question is this something that we want to consider or not? There's not necessarily a right or wrong answer here. We just want to be intentional about our choices, and again, make sure that we all agree on which path we want to move forward. And it just may not have been something that you all were aware of that we thought was important to bring up. When you look at the potential impact to the crime district, we're estimating about $150,000 to $200,000 potential additional revenue to the crime district. And from a public safety cost perspective, that's about 2 officers if we were interested in having the additional revenue to provide some of the flexibility for those things. It's not to say that we have to, or we're going to be in extreme dire straits if we don't. But as we consider our 5-year budget projection that Chief Miller is going to present here shortly, this is something to keep in mind, that this is a lever that we have available to us. Some might say that this is a loophole that we need to close, and that we're kind of giving an exemption on these certain services that shouldn't be there, and we should close that. Other perspectives may say, you know what, we don't want to apply that to those telecommunication services or to the gas and electricity services. So, like I said, not a right or wrong, but did want to bring this up for the Board of Directors' consideration, and at least make you all aware of it, so that we can be mindful and intentional in our choices.
So the gas and electric and the communications are not paying.
They're not paying the half-cent sales tax.
We're not charging they're not charging their customers, or they're not paying?
Neither.
No. Okay.
Wasn't there something, unfortunately off my notes, just recently where the legislative session came out to say that utility companies didn't have to pay a certain thing, and it was going to hurt our budget by a certain?
Yes, that is actually, that's related to the franchise fees they pay for having their lines in our right-of-way. So that is directly a hit to the general fund. It wouldn't impact this since this is sales tax funded, but it is yet another instance of utilities kind of getting a pass, if you will. You know, the unfortunate part is it'd be one thing if it was rate relief to the ratepayers for those cable franchise fees that you're referring to, but my understanding is when that went for discussion at the state legislature, they did not guarantee that they would pass that savings on to the customer. So, you know, my understanding is it's pretty much a extra lining in the profit margin for them.
What's the general practice of most cities?
I can tell you that when we were in Flower Mound, they passed it. A lot of the other cities in the region that I've had communication with make their sales tax applicable and do take advantage of this option.
I live in Hearst and I pay it.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I'm not aware of places other than Colleyville. I'm sure there's some, but most instances, it's funny, sometimes when we've held interviews in the past for our finance director position a number of years back, you know, folks are always trying to research your financials and figure out, oh, how can I, you know, have something that's helpful to say that's going to differentiate me. And actually, this was something that had been brought up in that process before of, did you know that you're missing out on this opportunity? And we just say, yes, we realize this is something we've talked about. We'll bring it up every so often, but it is a bit unusual.
So even though the franchise fees in the general fund, since we're intending to move now policemen and firemen into some of these funds, that could still be used to offset that.
Correct.
Certainly, we have, yeah, to your point, we have moved an officer each of the last several years from the general fund to the crime district fund.
I like the idea.
Is it something that you need to know now, or?
It's simply just something to bring up for discussion. If the board would like to think about it, we can do that and talk about it more at a future date. If it's something that there's interest in, we can bring forward a resolution. Obviously, tonight's meeting is a work session meeting, and we're not taking formal action. But your next meeting that is scheduled on the July 2nd, prior to the city council meeting, is a more formal action since you'll be voting on the budget. So there is an opportunity at that meeting to take a vote if you so wish, or we could schedule one for in the future, or think about it until next year. Really up to you guys.
I kind of like the idea.
I do too.
I mean, let's make up for lost funds in a way.
Yeah.
It's interesting, you may have noticed when we send you all your monthly sales tax email that says how we're doing, and you may have said, well, you know,
Notice the
why
difference.
is the half-cent CEDC sales tax different than the half-cent crime district sales tax? And it's interesting, when the comptroller collects that information and sends it back to the city, they collect the 1 penny general fund sales tax and the half-cent CEDC sales tax all together. We get one check, and then we put the 2/3 towards the general fund and the 1/3 towards CEDC. But the crime district is actually a completely separate transaction, separate report. It's interesting how the comptroller chooses to differentiate, but this is one of the reasons why you may notice that
Oh,
the
yeah, I
overall
noticed it.
revenues in the crime district are much lower than the
So
other
do we need
half-cent.
to take a consensus from the directors?
Sorry, I got your chair.
There's one over here, Mr. City Manager.
I don't think I smell. I took a shower.
So is everybody in agreement to this?
I like the idea.
We'd
Okay,
like to
we'll,
move forward with
we'll
that.
move forward with papering that up for you all to take some action and bring that forward in an upcoming meeting.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
2B is discussion and public hearing of the Colleyville Crime Control and Prevention District fiscal year 2020 budget. And I told Christine that we'll drag this out just as long as we'd like to do it, so she said, don't you dare. Go ahead. Chief Miller.
I'm not alone anymore.
Don't dare sit Tammy Steve.
No, I'm
So we don't need to go through the history, actually, since Adrian just covered it.
Sorry.
So we got one, first thing I wanted to do is just update you on some last year, this current fiscal year items that were funded, and give you an update as to where we are on these items. In FY19, you approved the creation of 2 new public service officer positions, public safety officer positions. Is that right? Yeah, public safety. I keep going back. Public service officer positions. They were created to help serve our community, to assist our police officers, and be extra eyes and ears in our city. After they were approved last year, we advertised for the positions and ultimately selected 2 for hire. We brought them on board in January, and they started a robust training program that included attending portions of the police academy, first aid, CPR, and then spent 8 weeks in field training with our police officers. Both of them made it through the training and were released on their own. They are out there. You probably see them directing traffic every once in a while. They're doing well. They're taking reports. They're directing traffic, serving alongside our police officers. There's a vehicle that jumped off the, off 26. I don't know if you saw it on the way in, is kind of high-centered. Our PSO is out there
Today?
right now.
Just
Yes.
now?
Just now. Our PSO is out there assisting our police officers. So we love what's going on there. We love the way that they are serving. We've already received compliments, especially on, we received a compliment on Ryan Crozier, who's the gentleman on the right. He was directing traffic. They loved how he was directing traffic out at Westcote McDonald. So great, great addition. Thank you for funding this.
What's Ryan's background?
Ryan's like 19 years old, so he's going to school and wants to be a police officer at some point in time, and so he's looking at that as a career path, as a stepping stone. Super just nice, genuine guy, both of them. Steve McDaniel, also long time, been around the department. Both of them are just really serving well, exactly what we were hoping they would do.
Great.
Are those the only two PSO positions we have?
Yes,
That's neat.
they're
That's
both,
working out so
they're
well.
both part-time. Our CALIA accreditation process, we started down this road about 6 months ago before I started, or 6 months before I started in May of 2018. It's a multi-year ongoing process. It requires us to examine all of our policies and procedures and ensure that they are aligned with CALIA standards, Texas best practices standards, and industry best practices. Unfortunately, our accreditation coordinator, who was also our records manager, left the organization for the private sector in February. And so the CALIA process is basically on hold until we talk about the possibility of funding a part-time accreditation coordinator, which we'll talk about in a few slides. The dumpster project. So in fiscal year 19, you funded a $45,000 line item for us to build a dumpster with lick and stick to make it look exactly like the Justice Center. Instead of outsourcing it for $45,000, Public Works actually did the work in-house. They were able to do it. It's really well done. It looks exactly like the building. It's
Looks
great.
great,
They did great.
They did it for $20,000. So we are asking your permission to take that extra $15,000 that we set aside for this dumpster project and for this fiscal year.
The other 10.
Do what?
What happened to the other 10?
Put it in somebody's pocket.
Savings.
Don't
encourage them.
That is a,
I'm sorry I'm taking your role here, George.
Well, I thought the same thing. I was like, do I say anything?
no, you should. I need to look at that very specifically. What I do know is that we need,
Saving it?
we may save it,
thought
yes.
you were
We need
saving
$15,000 though. That is, yeah.
Of course
Fuzzy
we're
math,
saving you.
fuzzy math.
Your chisel mop is off today. No, I'm teasing.
So
It's a work session. We'll work through it. So.
they completed, let me start over. They completed it for $20,000. We are asking to reprogram $15,000 of what's left over.
Okay.
From that line item into the recruiting and hiring line item budget. So we're proposing hiring a firm to help us develop promotion tests for sergeant and lieutenant. That's a process that we go through every once in a while. Once we create that list is good for a couple of years. So this outside firm would help us to create a test based on our books and the requirements. They would facilitate the testing process, design an assessment center for us, and that would cost approximately $15,000.
Are those all pretty unique per city?
It's relatively standard, the process, but each organization can choose. For example, we chose what books that we wanted to read based on our philosophy.
Okay.
So leadership books, we chose how we want to go about solving crime. We chose a book on that, and there is a menu of items that these firms offer. There's 50 books you can choose from, 50 topics. They typically say choose 3 of these and then send us your policies and procedures that you want tested over. And so depending on the level, sergeant or lieutenant, we're going to look at different things. We want them to know different things. They should know their policies and procedures if they're already a sergeant, want to be a lieutenant. So this process would facilitate that, and,
Chief,
sir?
just a quick comment. It's very common for each community to have their own promotion test and to be done by an independent organization. And so the only thing is, obviously, you want to do it as close to the time you think you're going to have promotions so that the list is valuable, because it does expire after a period of time.
So and thank you, Mr. Manager, for that perspective. It is, we want to ensure, in every test, there is we have to be careful, because there's always that perception that somebody, got the answers to the test, it was scored differently for them. So having an independent agency do that actually ensures transparency, objectivity, fairness.
Because you don't even know
Nope.
what's on
nope.
the test. It's
So
just
that way, and they facilitate it, and they bring in folks from other agencies to help score it, to help create the test. There was one other point that you brought up that I can't remember what I was going to say now.
The list expiration?
So
The list expiration, thank you. So our policy actually says that list is good until we make a first promotion off of that list. So that is when the clock starts on that, and then it's 2 years after that. So if we create the list and we don't promote off of it for a period of time, that list is still good until we make that first promotion.
Is, my question just escaped my brain, sorry.
Thanks.
Come back to me, I don't know.
So our plan right now is to test in August for both sergeant and lieutenant. We have had the highest level of interest in promotion in recent memory. There's our memory right there. Nine officers and corporals have put in for the sergeant position. And
Sorry, I know the question. The test only happens every 2 years or every so often, whenever
it's needed.
Okay. So when you
So
start to
if, yeah,
people
and-
express interest, you set up a testing period.
Correct,
Okay,
yeah.
or when there's vacancies.
When there's vacancies. If that list has been exhausted, then there's vacancies.
I see.
So we don't do it every year, we won't need it every year. With a group like 9, we may not need it for a period of
Oh,
time.
wow.
That's great.
But we love the interest, we love the excitement.
Sure.
We're excited about all that.
How long does that take?
So how long, it's a,
To do set up the test and do all that stuff?
it's about a month long to get that going, and then we have to give them a period of time to read the material and prepare for that. So that's why we're targeting August.
Got it.
Just a sign of good leadership.
I think it's a team effort for sure. So now we're going to move into discussing the new initiatives that we're going to bring forth for your consideration in this year's budget request. We're going to talk about a new sergeant position, a part-time accreditation coordinator position, training funding, some software, and the new CAD and RMS system. Some of these things you've already been we've talked to you about, so they should not be surprises. On the sergeant position, in 2017, that sergeant position was actually added to the CCCPD budget and projected out for FY20. Here we are in FY20. This position will address the span of control issues that we currently experience in the Criminal Investigative Division. If you see there, basically there's only one supervisor in CID. There's one sergeant and one lieutenant, and then basically everybody that's on this list here reports directly to that lieutenant. All the school resource officers report to that lieutenant. The code enforcement officer reports to it. The sergeant, that one sergeant that we have in CID reports to that lieutenant. Crossing guards, court bailiff and warrant officer, property room tech, and training and personnel sergeant, who also does our internal affairs. So the span of control is a little bit out of whack for what we want when it comes to ensuring that we have robust supervision in this organization. And so we're asking for that sergeant to be approved there. That addition of one sergeant will actually take care of that span of control issue, and we'll keep it somewhere around 1 to 5 to 7, one supervisor to 5 to 7 officers, which is
So right
sweet
now,
spot.
those positions all report to who?
Well, there is a CID lieutenant,
To the lieutenant?
Missing?
yes, who is the assistant chief of police at this point in time. But that, so without talking about individuals,
Yeah, okay.
these positions all report directly to that
To that
to
lieutenant.
Yeah,
lieutenant.
okay.
And that,
Okay.
we don't have
So if
that.
we add another sergeant within CID, we'll split this up across those 2 sergeants and the lieutenant. And so we'll be able to get a better span of control, which will allow us to take care of issues, stay on top of issues a little bit better. Criminal investigations is something that needs robust supervision.
Sure.
And is your testing going to then fill that lieutenant position?
Yes, absolutely. Yep.
So she'll be happy,
Yes, she will.
not identifying any.
We're,
person.
yes.
Whoever.
The assistant chief who's
Shouldn't say-
fulfilling that
assistant chief
duty
who's filling
and the
the
assistant
role will
chief
be
duty
happy, yeah.
and everything else, she will be happy that she has
Right.
some assistance there. So I'll move on. Any questions on that one?
No.
Okay. So this is the next position that we want to talk about. This is a part-time accreditation coordinator position. As you can see, the employee was who managed our Texas Best Practices accreditation, as well as the CALIA accreditation process, left. We talked about it is a multi-year ongoing process that takes, there's stuff to do every week. And so we've kind of put it on hold at this point in time. Our desire is to hire a part-time person who could take on the role of accreditation in general for the police department. The requirements for Texas and the requirements for CALIA, which is national, are separate, although there's synergy, and they and the best practices and the requirements are very similar. And there's so it's, if you know how to do one, you can figure out the other. But there are ongoing processes that happen almost every day that we need somebody to help out with. Now we hope to hire a part-time employee who has done this before. So we would love somebody who's retired, somebody who could come in and has the experience to do this and could hit the ground running. Basically, we don't have the experience in the agency now, and we're trying to backfill that and fill that hole. We did look at a number of options before we recommended a part-time civilian position. Those options included using a sworn resource to do that, full-time civilian resource to do that. We surveyed 13 departments in the area and found the majority of them actually fill the position with a full-time civilian employee dedicated to accreditation. Some of the larger departments can actually put a sworn officer in that position. I don't think that's good use of sworn resources for us. And then there are some things that are in between where they have other duties as assigned. But we think, based on my experience in Coral Gables, where we were a CALIA accredited agency, and we've now moved to a part-time civilian accreditation manager. And also we brought in a CALIA commissioner to look at our current operations, where we were in that process after Tracy left us. And she also thought that we could make do with a part-time resource, a part-time civilian employee doing this, although she said it's going to likely take all 29 hours of that person's time to do it, but she thinks we could do it. Now, specifically for this position, we worked with HR throughout the process to look at the appropriate pay level for this position. We have it budgeted for $27,000. We did reclassify an existing position within our records management department, and that saved some money there. We also had an internal promotion to the records manager position, and that salary started at a lower salary than the previous person in that position was getting paid. And so we were able to save about $10,000. So if you approve this position, it would really only require an additional $17,000 to fully fund it.
For the individual that left, did that individual have more duties than just this activity?
Yes, the individual that left was our records manager.
Okay.
And so she supervised the entire records process. She also did this on the side. She had somebody that was who could do a lot of the record stuff, and she could spend a little bit more time on the accreditation side. Right now, we have somebody new that's never been a records manager before, running the agency, running the division, and we have a brand new employee in there. And so we think it's best to. You won't find those skill sets combined in anybody but her, likely. I have rarely seen somebody that does both records and accreditation. She just happened to. It got dropped on her lap, and then she didn't have to do a lot of the CALIA stuff. It ramped up near the time that she started to leave. So there's actually quite a bit more work with CALIA coming forward.
So doing CALIA, does that kind of mean that you end up dedicating a resource to that wherever?
Yes, you would, if you're accredited, any accreditation, we would have to dedicate some time, because we're already accredited in the state of Texas. That accreditation process you get reviewed every 3 or 4 years, depending on that cycle. There are time-sensitive things. There's a schedule for accreditation, and so things that have to happen in the agency to meet those requirements, that accreditation manager is on top of. So this report has to get done. These goals and objectives have to be done every year. This particular memo has to go out. The proofs that we're doing this particular standard, those get put in. There's a system to manage, and then they actually work with the folks who come on site to review us as well. So there's a steady state of activity that happens all the time, and then when it comes time to get reaccredited, that amount of time spikes. We actually stop the changes so that we freeze what we're doing so that we can get evaluated, but they focus then on ensuring that the on-site assessment goes well. So, yes, to answer your question. Any questions? So, two other things that we want to talk about here on this slide. Basically, it's new software and new training. So, when I came in, I did an initial 90-day assessment or review of our agency and the things that we were doing. Some of the things that we were not doing. We identified some opportunities to enhance our training in the department. In my experience, agencies that have low activity, you really need to increase the training to ensure that our officers are ready to handle any situation that they may not see every day. Places like Dallas and Fort Worth, where they deal with many situations like this on a daily basis, you don't need that much training to ensure that they're proficient in many of these things. So anyway, so there are some opportunities for us to look at some additional funding for leadership development for our staff. Some of these classes, there's one class that we typically see senior staff going to called the Senior Management Institute for Police. It's a police executive research forum school. That one school is about $9,700, $9,750 just to send one person to a year. So that's the type of leadership training that I would love to ensure that our senior staff get the opportunity to go to.
It's a quite long course.
It's a 3-week course. That one's 3 weeks.
I'm
And
thinking
it's taught.
a month, but in that time.
Yeah, it's they're typically anywhere from 3 weeks to 3 months kind of classes for these kinds of things. Right now, we're not really doing anything. We have no plan for leadership development for our senior staff, and I think this would be a great opportunity. And then the other one is $10,000 we're asking for additional funding for ongoing de-escalation and crisis intervention training. So ensuring that our police officers are given all of the tools possible to deal very safely with the vulnerable and the population that where we run the biggest risk of using force. So these are those are particular areas that we want to focus on that we think there's opportunities to train going forward. The last piece is some additional funding we're asking for software. It's basically software as a service, subscription services. One is an investigative data platform that will allow our detectives to do more searching on different types of data. It's going to help them immensely in their investigations. And then the other piece of that is an early warning system, which is a system that takes data from different places and looks at officers who may have complaints or uses of force or those kinds of things to identify officers that may need redirection or intervention before they actually become a problem. Early warning systems are standard across the industry. We've never had one here. They are actually required for accreditation. It's a best practice. And this system that we're looking at here is about $5,500 a year. It not only is an early warning system, it is also an internal affairs investigative system and some other things. Right now, our internal affairs investigations are done on paper. So we have no system to do that at all at this point in time. So for $5,500, we can get both the early warning system that meets that accreditation requirement and an internal affairs system that allows us to do electronic investigations and share them across the chain of command for approval. Any questions with that?
Right. Isn't it more like 15,000?
So the
9,700 for the investigator?
it's 97 for the investigative data
Right.
platform, and it's 5,500 for the bottom one.
Just checking.
Yes, sir. So we've talked about the last one. The last new request that we have here is we talked about the CAD and RMS system replacement. Essentially, a consortium of, right now it's South Lake, us, and Keller, but Grapevine is joined, and we are all currently on the same system. That we have basically, this system is called CRIMES. It's managed is designed and managed by Sam Houston State University. We've basically all outgrown the system, and we think we need to be looking at another commercial off-the-shelf system going forward. The plans are to obtain a consultant this fiscal year that can facilitate the requirements gathering process, RFP process, and system selection. It's a complicated system just due to the fact that we've got now 4 police departments and 4 or 5 fire departments. There'll be 2 dispatch centers. So, but we think there's economies of scale with all of us going together. Plus, it'll give us. Right now, we don't have any. We don't share data with Grapevine, even though we share a border with them. We think that if we're all on the same platform, we're going to be able to look at all of our resources regionally and be able to ensure that if there's a problem on their side of the border and we have an officer right next to there, we should be able to respond over there to take care of that problem or at least stabilize it until they can arrive and vice versa. So we think there's some good opportunity there. We're estimating about $50,000 this fiscal year for the consultant, and then right now we think that our estimate on the CAD and RMS system going forward is going to be about $375,000. That'll be budgeted for next fiscal year, or FY20.
There'll be some ongoing charges, though, right?
There will be, yes.
Maintenance or whatever.
And it won't kick in until the next couple of fiscal years or after that. So it depends on what's in that initial contract.
Right.
And we don't have an estimate for it based on, we do have an expense already. That's the maintenance for our ongoing system at $49,000. That's in there, and that's out for the next 5 years. So there's a placeholder there
Sounds pretty good, yeah.
for that. But it will just really depend upon the system that we choose.
And in theory, the $375 is a one-time purchase fee,
Correct.
and then there's an ongoing expense.
Then there'll be ongoing
So,
expenses,
yeah,
yep.
okay, got it.
Where is the $50,000?
We don't have 50,000 in there because we're gonna find existing funding. It's that 50,000 is a new requirement that just came out. And it is we're gonna find existing funding sources in this budget year, to fund that. We're not asking for, that to be placed in the budget.
Okay, good.
So right now, y'all can't communicate and share information, but with the system, you will be able to?
So right now, the Keller, South Lake, and Colleyville are all on the same system.
Right.
And we do share information between us.
Right, but with other cities?
Grapevine, we don't do anything with, outside of our officers meeting, when we have a task force or we have a crime issue. We have worked cases with them. But yeah, we're not on the same system.
So if something happened, like off Pool Road, it was on the Colleyville or the Grapevine side, and nobody was nearby from one city, they wouldn't call the other city? Like, that's just not.
No, we would. Yeah, so.
It's just not done through the system
Our
automatically.
radios all have the ability to change the channel and talk to their officers. We work on a regular basis.
I figured you did, I just
We
don't
do, but
understand.
our systems don't communicate.
Okay.
So,
I think the biggest point here is not the crossover communication, that's a secondary conversation. Everything they do, whether they're responding to a call or just simply getting out of the car, they have recorded through the CAD system. It's a way to track everything that occurs for officers and for the fire department in response to calls. And so this system is a database type system that tracks everything, and it currently is running with a software that we've been hearing now for a couple of years is a bit antiquated and was designed for a smaller operation. And so Keller who I would say leads this, you know, from their side of the equation, really has been talking about this for quite some time and the need. And so the Sam Houston State conversation we had last year about their support and their software kind of necessitated us moving forward at some point. And so we weren't ever sure if it was going to be this year, next year, or even last year. And I think the different departments kind of shifted in their discussion until settling on the fact that they want to do it next year. And so we're part of that process. We're one part, but it is a very expensive transformation, and it is basically a re-emergence of our entire software tracking system for all the calls. And so it's designed to be a one-time thing you do, you know, once in a blue moon, but it is a major transition. And so it is a big cost, but it's not something new. We've been talking about it for a couple of years.
How will this be managed? How will this project be managed? How will the different cities interact on managing it?
Yeah, Keller will take the lead and all of our, so there's a team that's been formed and that operates today just as it is, because we share those resources today. Our IT directors are all in contact with one another. The chiefs are all in contact with one another when it comes to policies, and we operate well.
It's kind of all integrated in with dispatch.
Yeah,
So it
that
is a
dispatch
that's
center.
what CAD stands for, Computer Aided Dispatch and Records Management System are the acronyms.
We all saw that on the tour. That's the software they were using to track all of the calls.
Sure.
And since Keller runs the dispatch center, they handle, they take the lead. But this was a bit of a surprise this year, not because the subject matter wasn't gonna come up, but it did kind of come about fairly quickly. And I think that's because Keller started looking at their budget and started talking about when is the right time.
Yeah.
And so they said, well, we want to do it next year. They came to us. I initially said, okay, you know, that's a bit of a surprise, but I certainly wasn't surprised by the conversation. I was surprised that it went from, you know, kind of being talked about to moving forward. But I do agree, there was some point they're gonna have to, and if it wasn't gonna be in 20, it was gonna be in 21. So we'd just be kicking the can down the road.
The one big discussion piece was and these are approximations, right? But the $50,000 for a consultant. Keller wanted to do it themselves, and South Lake and us basically said, look, it's so complicated. The requirements process itself is complicated enough that, and this is $1 million+ project. Let's make sure that we get somebody who knows how to do this, does it for a living. And we frankly are a thin organization, so we don't have somebody that we can just dedicate to that. Sure. So we think it's money well spent. No one else, and Keller came on board very quickly with that once they started talking to people and said, all right, we wouldn't recommend doing it any other way. But that's how we found ourselves.
$50,000 doesn't buy a lot of consultant time.
Well, on the
It's
back end.
200.
It's if they're skilled, you know.
Yeah.
that-
All
that's
all
the-
of us are 50,000 is really just our piece.
Oh, I
So-
know. Yeah, I understand.
But on the back end, if this system doesn't work, it will cost a heck of a lot more.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
This is not just the dispatch system. So dispatch is one piece of it, but we also, when that records management system is everything that a police officer does when it comes to writing a report, investigating a case, filling out all of the investigative data, property, all of that is involved in this. This is really our enterprise management package. This is what we live in 24/7.
So they will all be using this operationally constantly.
We do today, and there are systems where,
Well, I was gonna get at, you gotta have training, you gotta convert the users over to how to use it.
correct. So there will be a training process, there will be a learning curve. Cops, our guys and gals are not gonna like it.
Of course.
Cops hate two things, right? Cops hate the way things are and change. And so it is not going to be, we'll hear some complaints for sure. And there's no silver bullet in this market. I know the market well. It's almost a commodity market. They all do basically the same things. Some have its own little flavors here and there. But the other big thing that we talked about last time, we haven't touched on here, is the one reason that's driving this is that there's a change in requirements for our crime reporting, both to the state and to the FBI.
I think you briefed us on that
Yes,
last year.
it's summary reporting system to NIBRS. And so those deadlines are approaching, and we still have to fall in line to ensure that we're able to report that data. And if we can't, then there's some penalties. We can't apply for grants. There's all kinds of downstream things that we just don't want to get in.
So this will be an off-the-shelf system.
Yes. Yeah, we're not having anybody do custom anything. And you can buy a separate CAD module, you can buy a separate records management system, but they're so closely tied, the interfaces are so standardized that almost no one is selling individual systems now. You're buying a CAD and RMS system
Yeah, you
together.
you certainly wouldn't want to have an interface.
It is when you do bolt it on, it's so much more complicated.
Yep, for sure. Yep.
So,
How long can you expect a system like this to be productive as well? I mean,
years, like 10, 15 years.
okay,
probably.
so I was wondering how often do you need to update it? 10 years?
So going with a major company that does this, they've got a release schedule. They stay on top of the things that are coming around nationally, enhancements, those kinds of things. So there'll be a pathway for the development of the software. The problem that the current organization has had is that they'll do an enhancement for one, and then they'll do another enhancement for another, and then they'll do another enhancement for another one. And then when it comes to upgrade a major revolution to now do NIBRS, this new version may break something over here, but it may work over here, but back over here there's another fix. So version controlling and release scheduling, doing that very well is not, this organization's behind the 8 ball on that right now. So
Sure.
that won't be a problem with
It has to be a very structured approach, and
you can't
everything
do,
has to be managed.
and there's a process for getting changes in there.
Sure.
Just because they want to change and they want to change, it has to, everybody's going to get that change if they approve it. That way, it's so easy.
So
When
your
you
team that you have together is the change control group?
So
Well, that'll be
the vendor actually managed that process. So that
So somebody has to make a decision in the organization, or we're going to go ahead and do the change now or later, and why? The internal change control process.
on a package system like that, you don't have a lot of that. You either go or you don't.
Well, that's what I mean,
Yeah,
yeah.
He's asking who's-
But you got 4 organizations that have to make a decision.
sure.
That's
Who
all.
decides when the upgrade comes and to what degree?
Yeah, so typically Keller's going to take the lead right now in the way that we operate, and we have input.
We should create a process by which there's a voting process.
Yep.
And for
Committee.
through the consultant
Believe me,
review and
it-
all that.
Committee.
All of us probably
And the
lived through this many
The
times.
testing
Sides of
is,
the table.
Yeah.
and I don't have to tell you,
Yeah.
that the testing is absolute
Yeah.
critical, that number one, the change doesn't break what you already have, and that the data remains accessible. Because those kind of things can just collapse
Absolutely agree.
extremely easily.
You guys should form a committee made up of all of the representation agencies, and then have a voting process by which you decide, not only through the creation of the transition, but thereafter.
When you're doing all the requirements and specifications up front, you ought to insist that in that design, somebody's speaking to, how do we manage change among the organizations?
It's a good
Change and
point.
test, yeah.
Especially when you disagree on
Yeah,
upgrade
there will
modules.
be disagreement. Yeah.
There will be, and sometimes it's less about the software, it's more about the infrastructure.
Oh, yeah.
So that infrastructure is ours, or it's Keller's, or it's, the software is what it is. Many of those processes are much less painful when you go with a vendor that does it for large organizations and have been around the block a few times.
As long as they're structured.
Yes, but
Yeah.
we have to drive that. We have to ensure that we
Yeah, that's what
demand
the
that structure.
requirement,
Yeah, that's
the
right.
RFP has to do.
Exactly, yeah.
Is make sure that they have a good record of
What
that.
percentage
Because
lay that out as part of your consultant's work?
I hear you.
So
sure,
that
right.
you're upfront before, while you're picking vendors, you have a process in place for
Got
every
it.
decision.
Yes, sir, got it. Good points, Mayor. Anything else on this before we move forward? All right. So just, then we'll just, I know we have about we need to wrap up here in about 15 minutes. These are just ongoing initiatives. I wanted to make sure that we covered them. These are not new. These are existing things. We've just updated the dollar amounts to reflect increases in salary and whatnot. In FY20, we proposed funding of about $1,132,589 for salary and benefits for 11 sworn officer positions. As we talked earlier, this year also includes an additional sergeant. And if approved, our total authorized sworn staffing would increase from 43 to 44. So in addition to the part-time accreditation coordinator position mentioned earlier, this budget also includes $48,754 in existing funding for the part-time PSOs. And then below that, these items actually have not changed from the previous year. Moving on down the slide, we talked about the $49,500 to continue to fund our records management system, crimes and its maintenance. $5,492 for crime reports, analytical software, along with several other software maintenance agreements that are in existence and have been. And then Metroport Teen Court Program, we fund a total of the quarter of the regional costs, so our share is $33,750. Everyone knows what the Metroport Teen Court is. It allows our kids to keep Class C misdemeanors off their permanent record when they go before a trial.
Just,
Sure.
bookkeeping, on the, you had 27,000 for accreditation coordinator, but you said you were moving 10, so it's just a net 17?
So what we said is that we had saved 10 through the reclassification of one, and then an internal promotion. So what we haven't figured out, and I don't know the details, maybe the budget guys can do.
Yeah.
Those two positions were actually in the general fund budget. This position that we're talking about is in here, but net is 17,000.
Yeah.
So the savings is in the general fund, is what he's saying.
You have the recruiting hiring process is only $2,500.
Going forward,
You just talked.
sorry,
Well, it's not in here though. Is it?
it is in there. It's
So
at the top.
hiring is
It's
in the
like
projected 19 column.
Which one are you looking at, George?
Yeah, I was looking at the projected 20. I mean, are we talking about 20?
He's
Well,
still not doing it this year.
When he talked about the testing, he was recommending or seeking
Oh,
approval for
doing it
current
repurposing
year.
savings in the current year.
So you
I'm
can,
sorry.
so then next year you go back down to 27.
It is reflected in the FY19 column.
I see it
but
there.
it's
Okay.
How does our pay compare to other law enforcement agencies in the area?
So our pay and benefits are above the mid. We're not the highest, but we're above the midpoint, so we're competitive. It's hard to chase these the Planos of the world that are. I mean, some of them have a strategy that is we're just going to pay top dollar the minute you come in, and then you top out in 5 years. And then others have a strategy of ensuring that we're competitive, so above the midpoint, but we're not the highest. We're not going to be the lowest.
So we're maintaining the strategy that was put in place with the committee after we did. Now, the big thing was we wanted to avoid the compression as we move forward.
Yes, and the second thing we're doing as part of that strategy is that we're trying to also pay attention to the other things, like benefits, and health insurance is a big one. And so that's why, if you notice, we've also proposed this year that the increase in health insurance be absorbed within the budget. And so we're trying to avoid having salary be the conversation, but benefits be the deciding factor for why employees come or go, and so that's part of that balance as well.
I rarely see. Well, I've been here a year, so I can't say that I have a ton of experience here. But the people leaving that have left our agency since I've been here, and the ones that left right before I came in, are not necessarily leaving for pay. The first one, I've heard that pay may be an issue. Typically, what they do is they leave for activity. So it is slower here, and people don't get into police work. So we can't sell Colleyville is the safest city and attract people who want to become police officers, because what that says to them is that there's no action. There's nothing going on here, and I'm going to be bored on midnights. I'm going to be driving around until I'm crazy. So what we try to do is we try to find the other ways to get them engaged and make them feel a part of what we're doing, help create the strategies, kind of be part of the solution. We can offer them the abilities to wear multiple hats and to be involved in other things that keep their interest. If they're an officer who wants to just go call to call to call to call to call, then this is not the agency for them. And so we've actually changed our recruiting process to make sure that they have to ride with us so that they understand what that's like, what we're like. They have to understand our culture, and I hammer them when they come through the process to make sure, like, this is as much a choice for you as it is for us. I want you to be happy here, and I want you to know exactly what you're getting when you walk in the door. I don't want there to be a surprise. I'm not selling you that we're out kicking doors in and running SWAT calls every day. We're not. We are a service-oriented agency that we call it white glove service. You may change a light bulb for somebody who can't, and you have to be okay with that, and that's what our expectations are. And so that's what we see. But I think our differentiation, like, we're not an agency that goes call to call to call, but I think that's a benefit for us, and that is our own brand. That's our own special flavor, and so that's what we're trying to make sure that we communicate.
And we're looking ahead, we're not just responding.
That's right.
That's a huge difference.
And this place is supported by you, by our city manager's office. I mean, this is not a place where there's a lot of issues going on.
No.
This is a place where it's a nice place to work. All right, we're getting close here.
I know,
So,
I'm like, when I
department-
start throwing the technical, let's stop.
Yeah, soon. So we talked about,
SWATs.
also is here, is we talk about the vehicle replacement program. You guys are well familiar with that. We've talked about this before. We're gonna replace 4 vehicles, marked vehicles this fiscal year in '20. And we're gonna swap out the equipment, so we're not buying equipment. You'll see that budget go up and down depending on what we do. So some years we'll have to buy equipment, we'll buy it for 3 years, and the next years we'll swap it out. So it'll go up and down. That's the point there. We do have a weapons replacement program. We fund, I think, $10,000 for weapon replacements every year. And then we are part of the Northeast Tarrant County SWAT team. Northeast Tarrant SWAT team, which is made up of South Lake, Colleyville, Keller, Roanoke, and Trophy Club. We have up to 3 slots available on that. We only fill 1 right now, but we continue to have to provide for the team. So that's what that particular line item is there.
I have one question.
Sure.
The ending fund balance is obviously going down. Is there a minimum we need to maintain, or is there a goal?
There is,
that
and these
So-
guys play with that every time too. I don't say play with it, but they.
I was gonna say, so 90 days is our policy. We try to stay around 100, but certainly 90 days. So if our annual budget is around 2 million, I don't think we want to go below 500.
Okay.
But it's been part of the strategy for at least the last several years of drawing down what had grown to be
It was
quite a
pretty high.
substantial
Okay.
fund balance in here. So using it for those one-time purposes, for things like our CATA RMS system, makes sense.
The other thing too, as part of that strategy, has been that we want to connect the use or the collection of sales tax with the officers on the street.
I agree.
Sure.
And so, when you talk about a roof or you talk about a building addition, that's important. But people like hearing that that sales tax money is putting officers on the street that they can interact
And a
with.
vehicle they can.
And a vehicle they drive, and so we're
Product,
trying to
just,
get,
services and people that they can touch.
Absolutely. Yeah,
so we're trying to get this more toward operations and less toward capital.
I love it.
The capital still exists, but it exists in the city's CIP
Well, we have
plan.
tangible things that people can understand, and,
Yes.
yeah.
And the debt service going to 0, that's neat.
Yeah, that we
Yep,
paid
that's
off.
paid off.
So, really positive.
So just a few other items here, and then we'll wrap it up. Safety equipment, we're paying for replacement of different things like traffic cones and things that we put in our cars, combat gauze, et cetera. We have funding for 2 radar signs. We use those all the time to gather data. That's basically ongoing maintenance for those kinds of things. And then we have $5,000 that's set aside for any kind of complex crime scene that we may have. May or may not use that from year to year. We did talk about this. We had capital expenses in there in the CCCPD budget, but to better align our capital needs with our funding sources, we move them out to the city's capital improvement fund. So he just alluded to that.
And one of those this year is body cameras.
So this is the next one, yes. So the, no, you're right on. He's
Trying to speed you up a
he's
little
good. I know, I'm sorry.
Tasers.
So things that we talked about during our budget meetings, but we did not bring forth for you for consideration in the CCCPD budget. One of those things is a body camera program. We're requesting permission from you to implement a body cam program for all of our Colleyville police officers. We actually created the infrastructure source and everything when we did our new camera program, the in-car camera system. We planned for body cameras to be added so that we.
This is an additional.
So yeah,
Okay.
there is like a $92,000 to $3,000 additional cost that will take us to here.
But it's all part of that same system.
But it is all part of the same system, and the storage was already purchased. We just basically have to buy the body cams and some plug-ins.
I think we're gonna need it because we're behind the times from everybody else, in my opinion, and also, you know, something's gonna happen to where we're gonna wish we had that on our officers.
So I agree.
How much is it?
Sir?
How much is it?
$92,200, I think, is what the cost is. And we're, as we said here, this is something that we talked about in our budget meeting, but the city manager's office has found some funding that had not been used this fiscal year. I think it was out of the vehicle replacement fund.
Yeah.
And we think we can do that with this year's dollars potentially.
So we can go ahead.
Is that the plan? Or is
We
it-
have existing fund balance available in
Somewhere.
the vehicle and equipment replacement fund, so I think we're looking at sometime this fall, maybe.
Okay.
Great.
It's gonna take us a little bit of time it's not immediately plug and play. We also have to get a policy in place and all of those things.
Sure.
Um, So, yeah, we are the only one in Tarrant County actually right now that don't have body cameras, so.
Yeah, we need that for sure.
We're extremely happy that there's so much support for doing that. We're looking forward to moving forward with that. And then this will be something that you're gonna see on the consent agenda tonight, but we also talked about it when we were in our budget process. Our current set of tasers that we carry, the X26, will no longer be supported after 12/31/19. And so we are going to need to buy a new allotment of tasers this year. We did find some salary savings for our open positions. I believe that we're going to target for using for this purchase. So we won't bring a budget item for consideration, but we will, because it's over 50,000, need the city council's approval to move forward with this, and I've got it on the consent agenda tonight. I believe that cost is somewhere around $53,192.
Super. We'll use Bobby to test them, right?
Yeah, we're happy to
I'll
test
shoot
them
a lot
out.
of people with them, absolutely. I'll do it. Oh, you want me on the other end?
He isn't saying that, yeah.
Make sure it works on big people.
Tall people. You're not gonna miss this one, I promise. Go like this.
So this is the last slide, we're done. We do pay off this debt in
That's great.
2019, this fiscal year. And so we're excited about that. That's really what's kind of funded these additional requests that we brought to you today.
That's really cool.
Excellent.
I can't thank the city manager's office enough. I know many of you have said, hey, how can we support you? What can we do? Literally, there's so much just cooperation and can-do attitude on this team here that, you know, they found a way. It's not no, it's like, all right, let's figure out how to do this. And so we're really comfortable with what we've asked for. We're not asking for things that we don't think we need, and this team is confident with the budget that we've proposed here.
Awesome, Chief.
Any questions?
Sounds
I
great.
just love the fact that everything you propose has a connection to improving the quality of life for our residents. So makes it easy.
It really does. I mean,
President
that means everything.
To open a public hearing on
I do have to open up public hearing. Okay.
And I'll just qualify, this one's a little weird, I realize we're in a work session, but some of the state law requirements on this with the number of days in advance and days apart, things have to happen. In order to not have an extra meeting, we have a public hearing component available on this meeting date. A little weird.
So I'll do it now. Would you like for me to do it now?
If you would, please.
Okay, I'll open up public hearing. There's nobody here. Ben, you wanna talk in public hearing? Ben's like, I'm not even supposed to be here. All right. I'll close public hearing. And then I guess also, if that's everything, anybody else have any questions, discussions? All right, then I'll just call for adjournment at 5:29. Perfect.
Well done.
Excellent.
Way to go.
Excellent.
I had to laugh when we were talking to Hawkins, and he gives you the